Because my goal here is to ultimately, as my exit strategy, one is to flip this. Worst case scenario, we hold it. And then our numbers were a little bit rich too, just to be sure that there was nothing that could come out of nowhere.
That's a wildly tight profit margin. They've got numbers like yours, but then they're doing all the work themselves, right? You quickly find that, oh shit, even if I can pull it off this time, it's more like a magic trick rather than a scalable business model. What is up, YouTube? Matt McKeever here, and we're back with another episode of Deal Destruction. I've got Rodrigo here with me today, and we're going to be talking about a property in Toronto. So this is kind of a single family property that we're looking at right now.
Yeah, you got a pretty bang on. This is a pretty exciting one, single family. The opportunity with this one is really about kind of thinking, how can we get this more up to date? It's a little outdated here in this community. If you take a look at the pictures here, this is the backyard. You've got the garage. You can see it's a little bit of a more messier interior, some cleaning up there that needs to happen. That's the living space. This is the dining room. So that's about it for photos. It's a limited, but essentially what you're not capturing here is there's also a basement. It's unfinished. I've got actually check the property myself.
Does this door lead into the basement there?
Yeah, exactly. It's a nice separate entrance right there. So it'll take us to the upstairs unit and to the downstairs. Unfortunately, they don't put any pictures up for the basement for us to kind of visualize here, but essentially it's all open. You have a furnace in there and your hot water tank. And then you have a little bit of a plumbing line that's kind of running down for an old bathroom that used to be there, but that's about it in terms of the basement. Okay. Upstairs wise, there's also an extra.
And so this is actually on your property too? I didn't realize that at first.
Yeah, it is. Exactly. Okay. Seems like the old owner there just kind of used that to kind of store because they had a construction company or something like that. Mm-hmm. At least from going around and kind of checking out myself, that's kind of the vibe that I got from it.
Okay. And just for the audience here, I'm going to read off the description. Lots of potential here. This all-brick detached bungalow sits on a corner lot with 3-car garage, 1 attached, 2 detached, and parking for 6 cars. Separate side entrance to basement. This opportunity restore, rebuild in Weston that you've been waiting for. Extras include fridge, stove, dishwasher, gas furnace, replaced 2018, conveniently located near 401 and 400, close to public transit, shopping, much more. So just so we can get our bearings. You're going to be likely a lot more familiar with Toronto than me, but yep, that looks like proper Toronto,
It's a pretty busy area around there. You're a little bit more to the outskirts of Toronto. But if anybody is actually from the Toronto area, it's kind of close to Yorkdale Shopping Center, which tends to be a pretty busy place.
Yeah.
With a lot of people coming through subways or TTC or anything of that matter.
Okay. And so do you know when this property was listed? Like, has this been on the market for a while? Have they priced this where this is going into a bidding war? What does that look like?
So it's a good question. Not too long. It's been on the market, I think, for about 6 days now. Offer date is actually tomorrow. So haven't been able to put in an offer yet. So perfect timing for this video. So in terms of kind of maybe trying to get a really good deal, because it's been sitting for a long time, I don't think it's going to happen. I think they've priced it competitive compared to the houses that are selling there. I have a comparable that I'll share. One sold recently, 22 Spears. It actually sold for $850. It wasn't too up to date, but it was in a lot cleaner move-in condition in comparison to this.
Gotcha. Okay. And then let's just talk about that basement a little bit. Are we good on ceiling height clearance and everything like that? Is there any concerns there?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the ceiling height is actually pretty good. I wouldn't say it's about, I would say it's about 6.5 feet. Okay. Sorry, I got my dog barking in the back.
Yeah. But so that 6.5 feet, does that include drywall and flooring already, or is it unfinished?
It's unfinished. So after potentially putting that drywall on top and the flooring, it'll probably eat up, let's say, about another 2 inches at least. So there's enough to squeeze in with like let's say 6'3", but it's not like your legal ceiling height, I would say.
Yeah, so that's definitely something to be aware of. And again, I'm not as intimately familiar with the Toronto market, but certainly here in London, that would be a big downside just because, in essence, the likelihood of you getting to put in that basement unit legally would be pretty much zero if we don't have the right ceiling height. So you'd either be looking at not being able to use the space or having to dig out the basement, which again can, we get into a lot more expense. Beyond that, I guess the only other thoughts are windows and stuff, right? Whether they're egress or whether you're going to need to cut in additional larger windows. So I don't know if you've already got that mapped out in your budget, but just kind of, it's a little hard to see just because of all the bushes and stuff, but it seems like there's probably not a lot of windows in the basement right now. And the ones that
there isn't
are
too many windows. I think there's about 3. There's one in the back. There's one to the right side. And I only caught that other one here in the front. On the left side of the property, I haven't been able to actually see any.
Gotcha. Yeah, so that's just one other thing taken in consideration. But yeah, let's check out the comp and your spreadsheet.
Sure. Let me just share my screen. Give me a quick second. Just pull it over.
And so what would you say overall is the goal with this? Is this going to be your first property? Is this get the proof of concept? Have you done this before? What does that look like?
So this is going to be my second property. I already have a first home here actually in Toronto. It was a bit of a different strategy with that first home. So the first home was more so, let me get a place to live and let me maybe add an income suite so that I can kind of leverage that and not have as much worry about like financial expenses from a month-to-month perspective because it gets expensive to live here. And now I've kind of switched my strategy of, okay, I kind of feel a bit comfortable in my space now. Let me figure out how to maybe start flipping so I can add some income because I think my ultimate goal is actually to have a large cash position where then I can invest that comfortably and kind of feel comfortable.
Gotcha. Okay, so all right.
So let me kind of share with you what I have here as estimates. So I'm sharing my screen here in terms of rental costs. So quite a bit here. So I'll kind of get it started on the upstairs level. So first thing to note is it is knob and tube. So there's going to be some issues with insurance to kind of likely get that up to speed. So it's hard to get it insured currently with knob and tube. I think this is going to have to be upgraded whether I want to or not. So I put in here about $15,000. This is to redo the wiring, get a new panel throughout the entire house. I have here about a $3,000 clean out disposal, which is going to be this house actually comes with a bunch of mess in it, to maybe rip out some drywalls. I'm going to do a lot of that work myself through the labor, but then I'm still going to have costs of like throwing this out. So I need bins and I need that to kind of get thrown out. So let's now kind of talk, like, let's say we have everything kind of cleaned out. There's one big thing I would do, which is if you remember the picture of the living room where it was that red room. I'll kind of bring up the picture here to kind of visualize it. So this is the kitchen and there's essentially a wall right here to the right. So I'm thinking of knocking that wall down. Hopefully it's nothing structural. And I'm pretty much putting about $5,000 for that. This might be a little low if it is a structural wall. I'll have to kind of rejig that down.
Okay.
In terms of other things to update in the upstairs, so I don't want to go with anything too fancy. I'm thinking more of like kind of simple, refreshed IKEA likely. So I have here essentially countertops. This would be for the actual countertops and to get them installed. Putting about $1,500 for a countertop. I got some backsplash. Backsplash, sink, faucet, hood vent. So I'm pretty much saying about $8,000 for the upstairs kitchen. Moving on to the bathroom, similar. So vanity, countertop, bathtub. Kind of need to get some better drywall that's kind of more durable for the bathroom, and put some tiling around it. Toilet, flooring, and then kind of the bathtub itself. So about $7,000. This one's a little high, I think, but it's just because there's always sometimes like I feel like mold or something hiding in the bathroom. And then I'm gonna be like, okay, I gotta maybe like clean up a little bit more. I got pot lights that I'd like to do throughout the entire house, just to kind of make it look like kind of a little bit more modern.
Yeah.
Flooring as well. So I'm thinking of something like a hardwood finished flooring. I like to kind of go a little bit more expensive on the flooring, just because durability from a long-term perspective, and it's expensive really in the labor piece to do the flooring. So if I just spend the money here, I know that from a long-term perspective, other people are going to see this as, hey, there's good quality here and craftsmanship, and I feel so comfortable jumping into that. So, because my goal here is to ultimately, as my exit strategy, one is to flip this. Worst case scenario, we hold it, but essentially still value there. So with the upstairs, I don't know if there's going to be a lot of drywall removals or the actual electrical work that we're going to have to do. So I'm putting here about another $8,000. This is to kind of put some new drywall, to finish it, kind of sand it, have it all prepped for painting. And then I got another about $4,500 to paint the upstairs. This number here could probably be a little bit different if I do it myself. Depends how busy I am, but it's a lot of work. And then I have here about $3,500 for permits. This number could be a little bit higher, depending on the work. And then I'm adding about another 15%, just a margin for error. I don't know if I'm bang on with these numbers. They're just estimates. So I'm pretty much saying right now the upstairs is about $80,000 to redo.
Yeah, this, I guess just a comment here, very thorough budget compared to what I normally see here on Deal Destruction. So that's great. I definitely think you should be safely in the right ballpark here. So yeah, that's awesome.
Good. The downstairs is a little bit cheaper. So I'm essentially doing a kitchen again, but I'm really going to go with everything from IKEA. So cabinets about $1,500, probably Black Friday or Boxing Day. They usually have sales on some nice kitchen kind of stuff that they're just trying to clear out. Probably pick up a couple of those to kind of fit into that budget. Countertop, again, IKEA, just get it cut, just get it installed, nothing fancy. You can get a nice little backsplash from Costco. They sell some pretty cheap ones, just kind of get the labor in, put it in. So about $4,300 for downstairs. And then I have the bathroom here too for the downstairs, which I'm going to get my total. Let me just quickly do that. So another $5,000 too. The one piece here that I'm going to just probably say that I didn't account too much for is the plumbing lines are just on one side of the basement. So there could be some more costs associated here if I have to stretch those plumbing lines to reach both the kitchen and the bathroom if I'm putting them on separate pieces. So that's the only really caution I'd pretty much say. I have about another $5,000 here for pot lights, which I think might be a little bit high. I think this one could probably come down a little bit, but I'll just leave it in there right now just to kind of a safety net. And then again, I have flooring for downstairs, which seems a little high again to me, but just to be on the safe side.
Yeah, and I guess one side note there, just on the flooring front, I would expect that you'll likely be a bit lower in the basement on your cost of flooring, just because you're probably going to want to do a vinyl plank or some sort of just, moisture proof flooring anyways. And so I don't imagine that you're going to end up going quite as high on that range. But again, I like the fact that there's just safety in your numbers.
Yeah, you got it. Hang on. So then that brings us to a grand total of about $130,000 to do this. Gotcha. A lot of money. You obviously need to have a lot of cash on hand to be able to do this. But keep in mind, this number here has, I think, some safety built into it to the actual kitchen numbers that I put in, and then I've added another buffer on top. So I think this number is a little high, but it's just better to be safe than sorry, and then realize damn, I didn't have the money to kind of cover that.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Let's jump over and look at what this all comes together like.
Sure. So it's listed for $740. I think probably getting a little too greedy to say that this is possible at a $675 purchase price. But let's just go with that number, assuming that we can pull that off. So I got about a $17,000 closing cost. This $17,000 closing cost is lower than the average, but that's because I already have a home in the York region. And so then I don't have to pay as much in my closing for the taxes. You only have to pay the Ontario land transfer tax. So it saves me a little bit there. So my total property cost would be about $691,000. So my total cash to be able to close, which would be 20% down, plus the closing is about $152,000. Then I'm pretty much saying, let's estimate this value after all the renovations to be about $900,000. And I'm pretty much estimating $900,000 because there was a comparable that sold there this summer. It actually sold for $855. It was listed at $799. It has the same lot size as the house we're comparing, same amount of bedrooms. It's on the same street, and it was very recent too. So contract date was just over the summer. So it's pretty recent as well. So I like that. And then I put here 2 pictures of the inside just for us to take a look at. So you can kind of see it's nothing up to date. I'd pretty much say it's anything like just kind of to get by. One thing to note too is that this is a heating through a radiator, and this one here at Spears already has a furnace in place. I think I see that as value, but I think it's personal preference at that point. So anyways, my number comes to 900, assuming there's a little bit of market appreciation. Let's assume that people see the value in having something a little bit more updated. I'm pretty much saying 900, essentially.
Gotcha. And then are you able to pull any other nearby sales over the last 6 months just to kind of help support that dollar amount? Or is this really the only comparable sale we could find?
I tried to find something a bit more comparable. Unfortunately, this was like the only one that I could find. I think the intersection was bang on. It's the street, same lot size. Other ones had different lot sizes. I think they were also more inferior in the comparisons because it was closer to a little bit of a plaza and it backed into a plaza. I think that the market is going to probably look at that a little differently because this one's more in the pocket and not as close to the streets. So it's probably a good point maybe to look into.
And I guess one other just point here is, were you able to find any properties that sold at 900 or greater, or would this be pushing the high end of the price range?
Yeah, great question. No, this would be pushing it. This would be the first for sure.
Gotcha. So so certainly for your sake, as well as for anyone at home, you can always be the nicest house in the neighborhood and make money doing it. But for a lot of investors and flippers, it feels a little bit riskier just because you've got less data points with you to back you up. Again, right now, we're in an extremely hot market. So odds are, if you were to buy this, close on it, renovate it, get it ready for the spring, and assuming that it's not the end of the world because of COVID 2.0 or whatever, I would suspect that you're probably right and you could hit or push that 900,000, but certainly in a more balanced market, I would have a lot more trepidations going in with the intentions of setting a new record for my neighborhood.
That's awesome. Yeah, great point. So best case scenario, let's say that, make a miracle happen and we can pull off the 900. We're looking at about $77,000 of profit before agent commission and holding costs. So it's not the best numbers out there, but one thing to keep in mind.
So that didn't have our, okay. Gotcha.
Right? So it plays really different after that agent commission.
I'm glad you included that though, because a lot of investors look at it through 2 rosy colored glasses. So that's a wildly tight profit margin.
Exactly. The question here that can be made is, when we were doing the rental costs, we did factor in a margin of error of 15% on 120,000, which is like $20,000. And then our numbers were a little bit rich too, just to be sure that there was nothing that could come out of nowhere. So I pretty much say if everything did go smooth, there was no margin of error needed, you could luckily probably save $40,000 here of net profit after agent commissions and holding out for 6 months. If for some reason people here in the Toronto market really want to be in this area, it's not uncommon sometimes for these to go over lists. That would be kind of maybe 925, then you can kind of start talking a little bit more in numbers. But the question really comes to is it worth to invest $300,000 in cash to just maybe profit out $12,000? And to me, if I've learned something from watching some of your other videos is, that cash on cash return, is it really here? Probably not, right?
Yeah, 100% agree. So do you mind just maybe quickly calculating that out for us? Or I can pull up a calculator here, but essentially if we're looking at 11,289 divided by your 283,378 total cash.
About 4%. I could probably get more than 4% by putting this into an index fund. into the market?
Yeah. And, if we're being generous, this is for a 6-month period. So if you were to reinvest it on a similar investment for an entire year, we'd be looking closer to an 8%. At the same time, I think just for anyone at home that's looking at these numbers, I would normally not encourage people to go after this if this is their primary goal, just because when we're getting into these higher end price points, the estimated value of 900,000, if we're off by 1%, that's $9,000. So, it can work out in our favor if we're kind of sandbagging and being conservative on our estimates, but there's definitely a risk there if it turns out that we were being aggressive and we've actually overestimated our costs. So, and, I think this is a perfect example of a lot of the sort of deals I see newer investors looking at where they start rationalizing. For the most part, I think your renovation numbers are going to turn out to be very accurate and likely going to cost around that, even if you don't do any of the work yourself. But where a lot of new investors get into trouble, they've got numbers like yours, but then they're doing all the work themselves, right? And so once you factor in any sort of labor cost for yourself, all of a sudden you quickly find that, oh shit, even if I can pull it off this time, it's more like a magic trick rather than a scalable business model, because a scalable business model has to be able to survive outside of my own individual efforts.
Yeah, that's bang on, exactly. So it seems to me like, exit strategy one, probably not the best scenario to kind of go about with this property. So I said, let's look at exit scenario number 2. Maybe we can break this out. Maybe there's some cash flow to be made. So I've kind of prepared here essentially what I think could make sense if we look at essentially gross rents that we can kind of pull off. I think the upstairs can probably get a little bit more than 2,000, but again, I'm going to put some conservatism into that number. So I'm going to say $2,000. That's at least what the comparables are going for in that area. And then let's say the downstairs, 1,600, everything would be kind of really fresh and updated. And then maybe kind of squeeze $100 off of coin laundry. It's, I think, not uncommon for investors, at least around here in the Toronto area, to have that. So in terms of mortgage, you're looking at about $2,700. This is going to assume a $720K mortgage at about 2% interest. You have utilities by month coming in about $40, not too much. Water, 50. I have gas, 75. Had hydro, 125. I got my insurance of 115. I have property tax, 300. Got about $130 right now factored in of repairs and maintenance. And then, worst case scenario, there's a little bit of a vacancy. I put in another $130. What I don't have here is property management, just because I'm so small right now. Obviously, from a scaling perspective, it's something we should obviously consider. But from where I am right now, I can kind of hold off on it for a little bit. So my net cash flow is about $51. So break even if you kind of are trying to hold off and maybe just get some market appreciation. That's at least how I'm looking at it.
And so I guess just looking at a couple of these numbers, property taxes, is that the actual number? I would have thought it'd be higher, but I'm not as dialed into Toronto property taxes.
It's about 3,103.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a little bit less than that.
So I guess just one thing to double check with the current owners, like if you end up going down this path, is like just double checking what the assessed value is in case the assessed value is a lot lower than the actual market value, because after this transaction closes in a couple of years, there's a good chance you might find yourself getting reassessed closer to fair market value. But yeah, these numbers overall seem pretty reasonable to me. And the one thing that stands out, if anything, there's probably a little bit more cash flow opportunity because you've got that separate 2-car garage, right? I don't know what that would rent for in Toronto, but even if it was just here in downtown London, Ontario, I mean, depending upon whether it's got electrical and a heat source, it could be renting for anywhere from $200 to $500, maybe even $600 a month in my market. So just kind of food for thought, depending upon the exact location, demand for things like that. There's a lot of contractors, a lot of small business owners that need a little bit of space. So we definitely find that those sometimes can really impact our bottom line from a cash flow perspective. And what's great is the garage, like the way the property is set up right now, you've got the single car garage with a parking space in front of it. Then you've got essentially 2 open parking spaces. Then you've got the 2-car garage with 2 more parking spaces in front of it. So because of all that space, it seems very practical to be able to rent out the 2-car garage. So yeah, if you don't mind, just
Jump
for
over
the
to the
audience.
picture. Yeah, I was thinking if I had it. Yeah, right here.
So like there's just so much space there that I could easily see you being able to rent out that 2-car garage and really adding to your bottom line. So even like, I don't like the fact you didn't include property management, but I bet that your cost of property management would be, you know, essentially the dollar amount you're going to be able to get from that, or potentially even a little bit more. So I think it works out.
Gotcha. That's a great point. I didn't factor that in at all. I mean, here in Toronto, it's kind of hard to find storage. So I can definitely see a contractor taking advantage of that. And like, I know people who actually rent out like a garage and it's just a single for at least like 150 to 200 bucks a month. So maybe it looks like the opportunity in this house is you're not making anything from the up and the downstairs levels, that breaks even. But where you can start to maybe cash a little bit is actually from this garage here.
Yeah, definitely some potential upside there. And also, like, just as a side note, again, as long as you set it up as a separate lease, right? You could actually set it up as a non-residential tenancy lease. So it's not going to be governed by the Residential Tenancy Act if you set things up right, which again means that 2 years from now, if that garage comes up for renewal, you could double the cost if that's where the fair market value is. Whereas with a residential tenancy lease, we can't do that because of the Residential Tenancy Act. So yeah, gotcha. I definitely like that little added piece.
That a little bit more. That's awesome.
All right. So anything else you think that we should think about before kind of summarizing this deal?
No, I think I try to like have some fun with it and look at it from a gross rental multiplier perspective. Your 1% rule doesn't apply here whatsoever.
Yeah,
it's like about like a 0.4, which is like purchase price plus closing plus renovations gets me that 823. So kind of let me just see the math that I did here. Yeah, so like 3,700 over the 823, yeah, 223, right? That's like about 0.4%. Less than 0.5%.
Yeah. So in summary, and if you don't mind, just stop the screen share because I would go back to full camera. But yeah, in summary, I think you've really done your numbers accurately, which I like, which shows just a lot of foresight. So I don't get the impression that you're emotionally jumping into a deal like this or any other deal. The biggest things that are of concern for me is just like setting a new record for the neighborhood. Again, overall, it doesn't seem out of place to me, especially once we factor in the bonus garage and just the extra living space and stuff like that. One note that if I was in your shoes, I'd want to just get acutely aware of is what are the implications if I renovate that basement, I end up with less than legal ceiling height and I rent it out? Is there a chance that the city can come knocking and just shut me down? Is there some sort of grandfathering process where I can make it legal and be non-conforming to the existing bylaws? Because obviously, if that basement apartment was to go, like if you were to be barred from being able to use that, all of a sudden the numbers look very unfavorable and it'd be difficult for me to encourage anyone to even consider a deal like this. So that's just a wild card to be aware of. And for perspective for yourself, as well as any other investors that are maybe watching this, you know, in my earlier days, I was more of a cowboy or like what we kind of call pirate. And so like pirates just like get into random things, they make money, but they don't have a consistent pattern. And it's often more like a magic trick rather than just a standard operating procedure. And so in my past, I would have got into deals like this and not necessarily been stressed out by the basement ceiling height. But with time, just as I've grown my portfolio and experience, I've really came to appreciate not having these weird properties because again, oftentimes when we're super hands-on with the management, we can weather those sort of storms. But the goal for most of us as real estate investors is to really grow a big scalable portfolio. And over time, what happens is some of these unique properties or unique situations we get ourselves into on a, you know, on a kind of like value of your time basis, they end up taking more time than other properties that are much more cookie cutter in their approach. So those are really the big factors I take into consideration here. But it is refreshing to see a property that looks like it could cash flow in Toronto, because I know there's always people trying to seek cash flow from Toronto. And usually that's like trying to put a saddle on a cow, where it's just not necessarily practical. But because of things like this additional auxiliary building or garage, it really does open up the potential to really squeeze just a little bit more gross revenue from property in an area that normally you wouldn't be able to do so. So I think the key is, if you're to go into this and hit an offer on Monday, like really stick to your numbers. Don't get emotional. If you need to get it for $695 or whatever we put in, stick to that. Don't end up going to 740 or getting emotional and going up, because what ends up happening, like I see it so often, an investor goes in with the best of intentions and they're like, I'm not going to be emotional. And then their realtor maybe pokes or prods them as like, come on, man, we've made like 20 offers and we've never got one accepted. Like this one, we're almost close. Just go that extra $50K and let's make sure it happens. But as you ran your numbers, right, we don't have an extra $50K to play with. So I think the biggest thing about moving forward with this deal is just knowing how it fits into your long-term plans. And so is this, I just want to get a deal to say I got another deal, or is it, this is going to be step one in a business model process where I'm going to start becoming the guy that converts basements and does this sort of thing. And, I'm going to document the entire process so that the next time I go to do this again, I can attract other people's money, right? And I can really raise the capital necessary so that I can scale this and have multiple projects on the go. If that's the direction you're going with, it makes sense to me. Again, the biggest asterisk is just that ceiling height in the basement. But outside of that, I would completely green light you if that's kind of the principle that we're using to justify maybe maybe it's not like quite where we want for cash flow or quite where we wanted for flipping profit. But again, there is a lot of value in just going through that experience, going through the school of hard knocks and documenting the process so that we can really raise capital for future projects.
Got it. Yeah, that was beautiful. Well said. I'll definitely take that one back. I think really it's about positioning it and where it's going to be in the portfolio, because obviously we saw it's a strategy one of flipping it. It's not going to add much, but there's a lot of risk to it. Maybe we're trying to cash flow and then we're trying to actually build some passive income without kind of worrying about it. I think it makes more sense, right? So definitely some thought there to be had before what to do with that offer date.
Awesome, man. Well, appreciate you coming on Deal Destruction. If people are curious about your real estate investing, if they want to follow along with you on your journey, can they? And what's the best social media platforms to do so on?
Yeah, actually, I do have a YouTube channel. I just kind of started off maybe about 2 months ago. It's called Rodrigo for Toronto, Canada. I talk a lot about things for kind of personal finance, how to kind of leverage your wealth and kind of grow quicker and start investing. And one of the things that I haven't done on my channel is real estate. And then I've been kind of pretty inspired by your videos. And I said, let me kind of kick it off with kind of this video. So if anybody wants to find me, I do have a YouTube channel. And it's a great privilege to be here with you today.
Awesome, man. Really appreciate you coming on the show. We'll make sure we throw a link in the video description down below so people can jump over to your YouTube channel. And best of luck on Monday.
Sweet, man. Thanks so much. Really appreciate your time.
Thanks. Have a great one.